He was a good winner, but sometimes a sore loser. Elvis wants to see you in the dressing room. I said, oh no, here we go. I just knew he was going to come down on that guitar.
What if I told you that James Burton has finally opened his heart about Elvis Presley? He wasn't just any guitarist. He was the one Elvis trusted most. Whenever the king shouted, "Play it, James," the spotlight turned his way. And now, at 85 years old, this legendary musician is revealing the stories he's kept hidden for decades. From private backstage moments to the final days of Elvis's life, James Burton is telling the truth about the man behind the legend. Was Elvis really the kind, generous soul fans believed he was? What mattered most to him? And what did James see in those final days? Stay with me, because these answers will surprise you. James Burton's fingers were born to dance across a guitar. Raised in D'Iberville, Louisiana, music wasn't something he was taught, it was something he felt. Completely self-taught, he picked up a guitar and let instinct guide him. By his teenage years, his playing was turning heads, and before long, the world began to notice. He joined the Louisiana Hayride radio show in Shreveport, where young stars, including a rising Elvis Presley, first found their voices. But James wasn't just another boy with a guitar. He had magic in his hands. Most teenagers only dreamed of Hollywood, but James lived it. Before he was 18, he left Louisiana and headed west, landing a spot with Ricky Nelson, one of the biggest teen idols of the time. With Ricky, James helped shape the rockabilly sound, playing on nearly all his hits for over a decade, but his guitar was already making history even earlier. In 1957, he created the unforgettable riff for Susie Q. Though he never received proper credit, that lick went on to become one of the most famous in rock history. As the years rolled on, James became one of the most in-demand studio guitarists in America. He played for legends like the Everly Brothers, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Glenn Campbell, and even Joni Mitchell. Quietly, his guitar was everywhere, even when his name wasn't. By the late 1960s, he was already a giant in the music world. But his life was about to change forever. In 1969, Elvis Presley came calling. This wasn't a one-time favor. Elvis wanted James as his lead guitarist for his brand new Las Vegas residency, the comeback that would define the rest of his career. James agreed, and the TCB band was born. TCB, taking care of business, was Elvis's motto, and James became its heart. On stage, Elvis would often grin, turn to James, and shout, "Play it, James!" And night after night, he delivered with precision, fire, and soul. James wasn't just Elvis's guitarist. He was his bandleader, his right hand, and in many ways his brother. Together, they toured America, filling arenas with fans and memories that still live today. Elvis trusted James completely, and James, in turn, was loyal to Elvis until the very end. That end came far too soon. On June 26, 1977, in Indianapolis, James stood on stage with Elvis one final time. Despite his failing health, Elvis gave everything he had, and as always, when the moment came, he turned and said, "Play it, James." No one knew it would be the last time. A few weeks later, Elvis was gone. James was devastated, but grateful that his last memory of Elvis was of him doing what he loved most, performing for his fans. Over the years, James often spoke about Elvis, not as the superstar, but as the man. He remembered Elvis as warm, generous, and deeply caring. Elvis made sure his band wasn't just treated as employees, but as family. If someone was struggling, financially, emotionally, or physically, Elvis would step in quietly to help. He was loyal, thoughtful, and always grateful. And above all, he loved his fans. No matter how tired or sick he was, Elvis gave 100% on stage, determined to send his audience home smiling. James also revealed Elvis's deep love for gospel music. While the world knew him as the king of rock and roll, gospel was where his soul truly lived. James believed that if Elvis had lived longer, he would have devoted himself almost entirely to gospel, because that's where he found peace. After Elvis's passing, James continued his musical journey, touring with John Denver for over a decade, recording with legends like Elvis Costello, Roy Orbison, and Jerry Lee Lewis, and later giving back through his James Burton Foundation, which provides guitars to kids and schools. Even after facing serious health struggles, James returned to the stage, proving his spirit and his music would never fade. But when James looks back, it isn't the awards, the fame, or the Hall of Fame inductions that matter most. It's the memory of Elvis, the friend who trusted him, the man who cared for those around him, and the legend who always said, "Play it, James!" Because for James Burton, Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was a brother, a friend, and a soul he'll never forget. James often recalls the very first time he stood beside Elvis on stage. The lights were blinding, the screams of the fans deafening. But what James remembers most vividly wasn't the chaos. It was Elvis's smile. That warm, boyish grin. The kind that could melt away nerves in an instant. James had already played with some of the biggest names in music, yet playing for Elvis felt different. It felt like stepping into history, like being invited into the heart of something that would never be repeated again. And deep down, James knew it wasn't just about the music. It was about the man himself. Elvis had a way of making everyone around him feel important. From the stagehands setting up the microphones to the musicians who carried his sound, he treated people with respect. James remembers late nights after shows, when Elvis would sit surrounded by his band, laughing, joking, sometimes just talking about life. He wasn't the king in those moments. He was just Elvis, a boy from Tupelo who never forgot where he came from. And to James, those were the memories that outshined the spotlight. There were nights when the two of them would stay up until dawn, guitars in hand, swapping licks, sharing stories. Elvis would lean back and say, "James, play me something sweet." And James would do just that, filling the quiet of Graceland with the kind of music that wasn't meant for crowds. It was meant for a friend. Those private sessions weren't about perfection, they were about connection. Two souls speaking the same language without needing words. But it wasn't always laughter. James saw the struggles too. He saw the weight Elvis carried, the pressure of being more than just a man. The world wanted a king, a symbol, an idol. But behind closed doors, Elvis sometimes wanted nothing more than peace. James remembers moments when Elvis would quietly sit at the piano, lost in thought, playing gospel songs that reminded him of home. James never interrupted. He just listened, knowing that those melodies were Elvis's way of holding on to something real in a world that demanded too much. And when the world grew too heavy, James tried to be the steady hand, the loyal friend. He never saw himself as just Elvis's guitarist. He saw himself as part of Elvis's family. And Elvis felt the same. Before shows, when the crowd roared and anticipation filled the air, Elvis would look back at James, giving him that familiar nod. "Play it, James." It wasn't just a cue. It was trust. It was friendship. It was a reminder that no matter how big the stage got, they were in it together. James carries those words with him to this day. Whenever he picks up his guitar, he can still hear Elvis's voice echoing in his heart. Sometimes, when he plays, he closes his eyes, and it feels like Elvis is still there, smiling, swaying, urging him on. And in those moments, the years fall away. And James isn't an old man reminiscing. He's back on stage, standing beside his brother, making music that shook the world. The world knows Elvis Presley as the king of rock and roll, the icon who changed music forever. But James knew him as something greater, as a man of kindness, humor, and faith. He remembers the way Elvis would go out of his way to help others, the quiet generosity that few ever saw. Whether it was giving gifts to strangers or lifting up his friends, Elvis's heart was always bigger than the fame. James saw it firsthand, and it left a mark on him that no award could ever replace. Even now, decades later, James still speaks of Elvis with a softness in his voice. He doesn't talk about the money or the sold-out arenas. He talks about the late-night conversations, the laughter, the prayers, the humanity of a man who was often treated like something more than human. Because for James, Elvis wasn't about the legend. He was about the love. When fans ask James what it was like to play with Elvis, he always pauses. How can you put something so profound into words? How do you explain the electricity of standing beside a man who could command an audience with a single look? But James always comes back to the same answer. It was an honor, he says. The greatest honor of my life. And when he says it, you can tell he isn't talking about fame. He's talking about friendship. Even now, when he performs, James keeps Elvis close. Every note he bends, every riff he plays, carries a piece of the man who once stood beside him. And though the world lost Elvis far too soon, James believes that his spirit never left. It lingers in the music, in the memories, in the hearts of those who truly knew him. James Burton has lived a life most musicians only dream of, playing with legends, shaping the sound of generations. But if you ask him what his greatest treasure is, he won't point to his gold records or his inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He'll point to the memories. The moments with Elvis that no one else saw, the bond they shared that went deeper than music. Because in the end, it wasn't about the stage lights or the applause. It was about two friends, two brothers, making music and sharing life together. And so, when James closes his eyes and thinks back, he doesn't see the bright lights or the roaring crowds. He sees Elvis's smile, hears his voice, and remembers the way he would always say, "Play it, James." Those words, simple yet powerful, are more than a memory. They're a legacy, a reminder that friendship, love, and music live on long after the final curtain falls. Because for James Burton, Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was family. He was a brother. He was a soul too great to ever be forgotten. And as long as James still plays, as long as his fingers still dance across the guitar strings, Elvis will never truly be gone.